to be safe and to be protected, and I want very much to live on the right side of history.
I too want to be on the right side of history, and I have a feeling the right side of history is going to be on whatever side is the opposite of Pedro Pascal.
Brand Marvel used to sell tickets in and of itself. It almost didn't matter what the movie was. People were interested because they were so bought into the MCU. And in particular, late into phase 3, it was just people trusted they were going to get a good movie.
It tanked in the second weekend, just like we thought. And not because it's a matter of Fantastic Four being good, bad, or otherwise. It's about everything that led up to this being relatively bad and uninteresting to audiences. This is all about the actual box office performance of Marvel in the last 4 to 5 years. You could almost set your watch by it.
Pedro Pascal is losing his mind, all right? We all know that, yes, the Fantastic Four, it does need a specific target margin.
The box office numbers were supposed to silence the doubters. Fantastic Four, First Steps, pulled in a massive $257 million globally. Solid, right? But barely a week after its release, the spotlight isn't on the movie anymore. It's on Pedro Pascal, and not in a good way. The headlines say it all. Pedro Pascal breaks down after Fantastic Four box office flop. But here's the twist. This might not be about box office numbers at all.
With Pedro Pascal making some of the worst decisions during the press tour for Fantastic Four.
One of Pedro and his Fantastic Four co-star, Vanessa Kirby, touching him affectionately in a series of clips.
Terrible confession to make in front of Gordon.
It's because some of the best men in the world, so they don't count.
Sure, the early earnings were decent. But what happened next completely hijacked the conversation. It wasn't the plot. It wasn't the casting. It wasn't even the critics. It was Pedro. And what started as a standard Marvel press tour quickly spiraled into one of the most bizarre, emotional, and politically charged promotional disasters in recent memory. Mid-interviews, he's crying. Press stops turn into political speeches. And instead of hyping up the film, Pedro Pascal is stealing the mic, ranting about Trump, freedom of speech, and blaming low ticket sales on.
So here's the piece from Deadline magazine. Fantastic Four First Steps, $40 million second frame. Just to remind you, it wasn't even a week ago that Deadline magazine was projecting a $48 million second weekend, a 60% drop from the first weekend. And then over the next few days after that, it became a 45 to 47 million.
Doing fantastic at the box office. Its opening weekend was good enough. It well outperformed Thunderbolts and Captain America Brave New World from earlier this year, but its second weekend saw a 66% drop off, which is a bad number.
MAGA fans, this was supposed to be Marvel's big comeback. A fresh reboot with big names and a new tone. But now, fans are walking out saying it felt less like a superhero movie and more like the Pedro Pascal Show. So what really happened behind the scenes? Why did Pedro break down publicly? And is he really hurting the movie more than helping it? Let's break down the full story, because trust me, it only gets messier from here. For a franchise that's been rebooted more times than fans care to count, Fantastic Four First Steps actually came out swinging. With a $257 million global opening, it didn't just show signs of life, it roared back onto the scene. Early projections were cautious, especially with superhero fatigue setting in hard across the industry.
And now it's looking like Fantastic Four is gonna bomb. I think Pedro Pascal fatigue is real. I think people are tired of this guy. He's in everything. He's constantly in all these magazines and websites are trying to say this is the sexiest man alive. There's that weird photo shoot where everyone's rubbing his face. All of the creepy anxiety things of him grabbing Vanessa Kirby's ass and face all the time is really weird.
But against the odds, this film managed to grab attention and fill seats. For a minute, it looked like Marvel might be back in business. There was even talk that it could outpace Captain America: Brave New World at the box office, especially with international audiences showing strong turnout. The cast? Star-studded. The visuals? Big and bold. The tone? Popcorn fun. Nothing too deep, just flashy enough to remind people why they loved these characters in the first place. Disney and Marvel Studios were counting on Fantastic Four to reboot not just a franchise, but fan excitement. And from a numbers standpoint, it was working. At first. But the buzz didn't last long, because while the movie was pulling in cash, something else was pulling all the attention.
That bugged me a little bit about the film is that there's a lot of plot armor thrown around in the film. Not even necessarily, I mean, sometimes it's for the characters, but a lot of it's just for plot elements. In order for certain things to work, it requires that Galactus not do really obvious things. The way that they're trying to come up with.
And it wasn't the plot or the action scenes. It was Pedro Pascal, front and center, not for his performance, but for everything happening off screen. And from here, the real drama began. Usually, press tours are simple. Smile, hype the movie, drop a few sound bites, move on. But Pedro Pascal had other plans. From the very start of Fantastic Four's promo run, he went completely off script. And it didn't take long for things to spiral. Instead of answering questions about the movie,
where Bob Iger is now having issues with Pedro Pascal. Just days ago, they already punished Pascal by reducing his press tour appearances and urging him to stop and cut it out with his politics. However, now Bob Iger took action against Pedro in the most unexpected way possible, where he canceled an entire featurette for Fantastic Four that was filmed, focusing strictly on Pedro as Reed Richards.
Pascal veered straight into politics. In interview after interview, he got emotional, even tearful, talking about anxiety, oppression, and the death of cinema. At one stop, he called himself a proud male feminist and broke down mid-sentence while trying to explain what the role meant to him. At another, he delivered an anti-Trump rant so intense, the room fell into stunned silence. It was supposed to be a celebration of Marvel's return, but now, the spotlight was glued to Pedro, and not because of his performance as Mr. Fantastic. Fans weren't quoting the movie. They were sharing clips of Pascal crying on camera and making political speeches during promo events. And just like that, the attention shifted. It wasn't about superheroes anymore. It was about Pedro's politics and how every appearance was starting to feel more like a campaign rally than a movie promo. And unfortunately for Marvel,
go on leading into the actual thing that they are trying to project. It means the trend line is probably going to continue. If it's fallen that much, from 48 million on Monday to 40 million today, chances are that the actual weekend numbers domestically for Fantastic Four are going to come in under $40 million.
Things were only going to get worse. At first, people brushed it off. Maybe. Pedro was just passionate, but then he kept going. Every press event seemed to spiral into another emotionally charged moment. One day, he's tearing up about his anxiety. The next, he's claiming that cinema is dying under President Trump. Then came the big one. Pedro flat out blamed the film's box office performance on Trump supporters refusing to watch it. That's when the internet exploded. Fans weren't just confused. They were angry. Clips went viral of Pedro choking up mid-interview, slamming MAGA, calling the political climate embarrassing, and suggesting that Hollywood was under attack. And it wasn't just once. This became a pattern. Press stops turned into monologues. Simple interviews became emotional confessionals, packed with hot-button topics and zero focus on the movie. Reporters sat in silence. Co-stars shifted awkwardly in their seats. And Marvel? Nowhere to be found. Instead of building momentum, Pedro's appearances were now dominating headlines for all the wrong reasons. And the worst part, every time Marvel tried to steer things back to Fantastic Four, Pedro dragged it right back to politics, anxiety, and outrage. The press tour wasn't just going off track. it had completely derailed. If Pedro Pascal's emotional outbursts raised eyebrows, what he said next lit a fire. During a now infamous interview, he claimed that Fantastic Four wasn't underperforming because of the film itself, but because certain groups were refusing to support it. And not just any group. He pointed directly at MAGA supporters, accusing them of boycotting the movie out of spite for Hollywood's values. His words? They have a vendetta against this industry. It's so childish, man. That one comment flipped the conversation completely. Fans who had stayed neutral were now furious. Even those who didn't support MAGA were asking, why drag politics into a Marvel film? Why alienate half the audience over personal beliefs? Suddenly, the conversation wasn't about Mr. Fantastic, screen time, or visual effects. It was about political identity, outrage culture, and whether actors should use blockbuster franchises as platforms for activism. It didn't matter if Pedro was right or wrong. What mattered was perception. And to a growing number of fans, this didn't feel like promotion. It felt like blame. Personal, pointed, and off-topic. And once the finger-pointing began, the fallout became impossible to ignore. Behind the cameras, chaos was brewing. While Pedro Pascal continued to dominate headlines with emotional interviews and political rants, Marvel's top brass were in full-blown damage control mode. According to insiders, quiet meetings started happening almost daily. The mission? Find a way to stop the bleeding without publicly throwing Pedro under the bus. Tension rose quickly. Several co-stars reportedly began skipping press events altogether, some without warning. Interviews were quietly canceled. Junkets trimmed down, and talking points were scrubbed clean. Anything remotely controversial, Marvel's PR team issued a new unofficial rule: stick to the movie, stay away from politics. But Pedro wasn't getting the memo or ignoring it on purpose. Instead of dialing things back, he kept leaning in. More speeches, more tears, more headlines that had nothing to do with the film itself. And the mood inside Marvel Studios? Uneasy. Some close to the project even said they now wished the role of Mr. Fantastic had gone to someone else entirely. Someone who could simply play the part and keep quiet during the rollout. Internally, morale was fading fast. Marvel had hoped for a triumphant reboot, but they were now dealing with a full-blown PR nightmare. Once the drama hit critical mass, the internet did what it always does: dug deep. Fans and critics alike started combing through Pedro Pascal's past interviews, piecing together a pattern. What they found wasn't new behavior. It was a trail, a long string of politically charged moments stretching across press tours, red carpets, and social media posts. Clips began resurfacing of Pedro making similar speeches during previous roles. The emotion, the politics, the crying, it had all happened before. Only this time, he wasn't promoting an indie drama or a passion project. He was leading Marvel's most iconic reboot in years. And suddenly, fans had a question Marvel couldn't ignore. Didn't they see this coming? Comment sections filled up with side-by-side comparisons. Threads popped up asking why Marvel, a studio known for tight control over its public image, would cast someone so unpredictable as the face of a billion-dollar franchise. It wasn't about opinions anymore. It was about planning, or the lack of it. The vibe shifted. It wasn't just a press tour gone wrong. It was starting to look like a massive miscalculation. By now, Fantastic Four wasn't just slipping out of the spotlight. It was being buried. Reviews? Overshadowed. Fan reactions? Lost in the noise. All anyone could tell was Pedro Pascal's breakdowns, political monologues, and press tour chaos. Some theaters even reported a drop in repeat ticket sales. Fans who showed up opening weekend weren't coming back. The buzz had shifted. Instead of word-of-mouth hype, people were saying the off-screen drama was louder than anything on the big screen. One viral comment nailed the mood. It felt more like Pedro's therapy session than a Marvel movie. And just like that, What was meant to be Marvel's triumphant reboot was quickly becoming an afterthought. In the aftermath, Marvel's silence has been deafening. No statements, no clarifications, just a quiet retreat as the media storm rages on. Insiders claim Pedro Pascal is taking time off and has gone dark on press obligations. Whether that's voluntary or enforced, no one's saying. Rumors are already swirling that Marvel is reconsidering future appearances of Mr. Fantastic, or even recasting entirely for future crossovers. Nothing confirmed, but the buzz is. As for Pedro, fans are split. Some see him as brave, others unhinged. But one thing's certain, Fantastic Four will forever be remembered, not just for its box office, but for the press tour that eclipsed the movie itself. Marvel wanted a comeback. What they got was a controversy. Pedro Pascal's emotional unraveling turned Fantastic Four from a cinematic event into a cultural flashpoint. And now, the question isn't about sequels, but survival. Will Marvel distance itself from Pascal to protect the brand? Will Pedro address the backlash? Or has this become yet another chapter in the long, messy reboot history of the Fantastic Four? One thing's clear, this story isn't over, and what happens next could reshape the MCU for years to come.